Hello everyone. So today we will be finishing up section 1.6 by talking about how to solve absolute value equations. So what is an absolute value? An absolute value of x is a function defined as the following. So the absolute value of x, so absolute value is denoted by two vertical lines, right? And this is equal to x if x is greater than or equal to 0, and it's negative x if x is less than 0, right? So for the equation, so the square root of u is equal to k, right? So this means that like u is equal to k or negative u is equal to k. And if you solve for u, right, then you get u is equal to negative k. So the solution set to the absolute value of u equals k is positive k and negative k. Right, so let's just think about this absolute value. So if I ask you, what is the absolute value of 3? Right, it's 3. And then what's the absolute value of negative 3? It is also 3. Right, so that's why we would have this. Because there's two options, okay, if it equals k, okay, there's two options of what you can be, right? There's a positive and then that positive part or the negative part. Right, that'll spit out the same answer. Right, so we have properties of absolute value equations, okay, assuming k is greater than or equal to 0. So the first property we already talked about is the absolute value of u is equal to k. This is equivalent to saying u is equal to k or u is equal to negative k. And keep in mind, the reason why we did this is because for the absolute value, so if I had the absolute value of u, this is equal to if we have it equal to k, we can either have the absolute value of u, okay, which would be u, or you have the absolute value of negative u, which would also spit out a u. Right, so then over here, we would get u is equal to k or negative u equals to k. But remember up here, we solved for u and we said it's equal to negative k. So you can just go straight to here, but I wanted to explain why it's going to be positive or minus k. It's because it's positive or minus u, but when it's minus u, we just solve for it, and then we'll get that negative k. All right? So the second one, the absolute value of u is equal to 0. This is equivalent to u is equal to 0. So let's think about this. So if I have u is equal to 0, okay, if I used even the first property, right, or I just use the definition, then I get u is equal to 0 or negative u is equal to 0. Right, so I get u is equal to 0 or u is equal to 0. Okay? So therefore, since they're both the same, then u is equal to 0. Right. The third property, the absolute value of u is equal to negative k has no solution. Right? Why is that? Because the absolute value always spits out a positive number. Right? So if that, and that's why we say k is greater than or equal to 0. Because if k is positive and you put like negative times a positive gives you a negative. But absolute value, you can say even negative like 1,000. Whoops. This will still give you a positive 1,000. Right? Absolute value always gives you a positive, so therefore it can never equal a negative number. Right? Remember, k has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, because what if k was less than 0? Then negative k would equal a negative times a negative, which would spit out a positive. Right? That is if k is less than 0. Okay. Last thing, so the fourth property, the absolute value of u is equal to absolute value of w. This is equivalent to saying u is equal to w or u is equal to negative w. Right? So, and then here are the steps to solving absolute value equations, and we will talk about that, we'll go over the steps as we do the examples. Right, so let me insert some space here. Okay, and let's look at the first block of examples, and our instructions are to solve for the variable. Okay, so we want to solve the absolute value of 5y plus 15 is equal to 5. right? So one thing I want to say, so you can either use this property, like you can use this property, all right? But if that's a little confusing or like just something you don't want to remember, one thing I just like to do is I like to rewrite this. So this is equivalent to saying 5y plus 15 is equal to 5, or you can say the negative of this whole entire 5y plus 15 is equal to 5. Right? Because when we do that, if I just look at the second equation, if I divide negative 1 from both sides, right, I'm left with 5y plus 15 is equal to negative 5. So you will still get to this result, right? But you just take another step, right? But this is how it this is where it comes from. Okay, so now let's solve for y. So this very first one, I'm going to look at it. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. When I do that, I get 5y is equal to I'm not subtracting 10 from both sides. I'm subtracting 15 from both sides. Because if I subtracted by 10, I would still be left with plus 5. Right, but remember, our goal is to make it plus 0. Okay, so when I do that, I get 5y equals negative 10. Right, then divide both sides by 5, then I get y is equal to negative 2. Okay, this one, right, solving again, so this is 5y. If I subtract 15 from both sides, I get minus 5 minus 15. Since they're both the same sign, we're going to add them and keep the negative. So this is negative 20, so therefore y is equal to negative 4. Right. I apologize. I realize I just skipped talking about the steps to solve an absolute value equation. So the first step was isolate the absolute value. Lucky for us. So when it means isolate the absolute value, when we have the absolute value, we want this to have a power of 1, and we want it to have a coefficient of 1. In this case, we already did, so step 1 was done. Okay. Step 2, it says apply one of the properties of the absolute value equations, right? So you can, there's 3 different ones for all 3 different properties. Okay, separate to 2 equations as properties in 1 and 4. Drop the absolute value in property 2, or state there is no solution because absolute value is always non-negative, as in property 3. Okay, we use property 1, right? Or kind of something else besides 1. If you used 1, it would have been this one. Okay. So, but we still applied property 1 and we put it into 2 equations. So we did that, and then we solved the equations. Okay, so we did step 2 by solving for y. Okay, now we have to check the proposed solutions. Okay, so checking y is equal to negative 2. Right, don't forget, so I have 5 times negative 2 plus 15. Is this equal to 5? Right, 5 times negative 2, that is negative 10 plus 15. Does this equal to 5? Okay, negative 10 plus 15, that's also 15 minus 10, so this is 5. Does this equal 5? The absolute value of 5 is 5. 5 does equal 5, so y equals negative 2 is a solution. Now let's look at y is equal to negative 4. When we plug that in, we get 5 times negative 4 plus 15. Does this equal to 5? Right. 5 times negative 4 is negative 20 plus 15. Does this equal to 5? Right. Negative 20 plus 15, that is negative 5. Does this equal to 5? The absolute value of negative 5 is 5, right? So this holds. Right? So what is our solution set? Our solution set is negative 2, negative 4. Right? So, sorry, I kind of want to talk about the definition a little more. So let's say, okay, the very first one I think is pretty straightforward, right? If, say, x is equal to 3 again, okay, so if I say the absolute value of 3, you go to that very first case, okay, so in this case, x is 3, so this is just 3, because x is positive because this is greater than or equal to 0. What if I say x is negative 3? Okay, so I have negative 3. By the definition, okay, it says the square root, the absolute value of x is equal to negative x if x is less than 0. So what does that mean? So since this is less than 0, okay, negative 3 is equal to negative x. And in this case, it would be negative 3, okay, which is positive 3. Right, so this definition just makes sure that you always spit out a positive. Right, so I just thought I should elaborate on that a little more. Okay, but let's continue on with our examples. Right, so for the second example, we are given the absolute value of 4y plus 8 is equal to 0. Okay, first step, we want to isolate our absolute value. Luckily, it is isolated already. The coefficient in front of it is 1, and it is to the power of 1. Okay, so now, we have to determine what kind of property we want. So for this one, we're going to apply this, the second property, right? Yeah, the second property, because we have an absolute value equal to 0. So what does that mean? This is just 4y plus 8 is equal to 0. Because remember, even if you split it up, you'll get with this is equal to positive 0, equal to negative 0. But what is that? That's just 0. Okay, so we just have to deal with one absolute value. Now we're going to solve for y. So this is 4y is equal to negative 8. And then we get y is equal to negative 2. All right, so now we have to check our potential solution. Right, so I'm going to check it up here. Okay, so wherever I see a y, I'm going to plug in a negative 2. Does this equal 0? Okay, this is negative 8 plus 8. Does this equal 0? Then this becomes the absolute value of 0. Okay, what is the absolute value of 0? It's just 0. 0 equals 0. This means that negative 2 is our solution. All right. Now, let's look at the third problem. Okay, the third problem, we are given 3y, we're given 5v plus 15 is equal to negative 10. Right, so remember, we're looking at this, so for absolute value, all right, this should throw up flags because an absolute value, I guess I forgot to mention this. Absolute value is a distance, okay? A distance is always positive, okay? So it's like you're walking, okay? You start at 0, okay? If you walk like to the left 3 units, so this becomes negative 3, right? You still walked a distance of 3 units, right? Same thing goes if you walk to the right 3 units, okay? You still walk 3 units, right? So that's what an absolute value is. An absolute value is a distance, which is why it's always positive. Okay, so since this is negative, all right, so absolute values can never be negative. So what does that mean? No solution. Right? I want you to write this reasoning, okay? Because I want not just negative 10, oh, so no solution. No, I want you to understand why is it not a solution. Okay? It's because it can never be negative. All right, we'll go over these in-class problems on Wednesday. So now let's work on the second block of examples. Okay, I can use orange. Okay, so these are just absolute values, and we're just going to take it a step further. So I have negative 3 times the absolute value of 2w is equal to negative 24. Right? So before you look at, so I know that like before like teaching this, like people look at this like, oh, it's negative. does not work. No solution. However, you can only say that once you have isolated your absolute value, all right? Always. So the absolute value, remember, it has to have a coefficient of 1 and it has to have a power of 1. So over here, the coefficient is -3. So what are we going to do to make it 1? We are going to divide both sides by -3. Or you can multiply both sides by -1/3. Okay. So when I divide both sides by -3, I'm left with -24 divided by -3. Okay, that is a +8. Okay, this is positive, all right? So that means we can continue on. So let's apply property 1. Okay, so this is 2w is equal to 8, or this is 2w is equal to -8. Okay, solve for w, then I get 4. Or w is equal to -4. Okay, let's check our answer. So check, if I can spell it right. Actually, I'll check it over here. So check, w is equal to +4. Okay, when I do that, so I have -3 times 2 times 4. Does this equal to -24? Right? 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, the absolute value of 8 is still 8, so this is -3 times 8. Okay, and as you can see, -3 times 8, that's -24, equals -24. So this is a solution. Alright, now I want to check w is equal to -4. Okay, so I have -3, 2 times -4, does this equal to -24, right? 2 times -4 is -8, but the square root, or I don't know why I keep saying square root, I apologize. The absolute value of -8 is +8, so I'm left with -3 times 8, or okay, I'll show my work. This is -8. Okay, so this is -3 times 8. And then we get -24, which is equal to -24. Alright, so what does this mean? This means that our solution set is ±4. Alright, now let's do problem number 2. Number 2, we are left with 5 times the absolute value of 3w is equal to 0. Right? First things first, we have to isolate the absolute value. So in order to do that, I'm going to divide both sides by 5. When I do that, I get 3w. Okay, remember 0 divided by a number, that is okay. So this is 0. Okay, so then, okay, since this is equal to 0, right? So if we apply this property, I would get +0 and -0. Okay, so but they're both 0, so we can just drop it. So we have 3w is equal to 0. When I divide both sides by 3, I get 0. Alright, so let's check it. Okay, so I have 5 and then 3 times 0. Oops. It's equal to, does this equal 0? Okay, I get, so then 5 and then 3 times 0 is 0. Does this equal 0? Right, so 5 times 0, the absolute value of 0 is 0. Right, then we get 0 is equal to 0. Okay, so our solution set is 0. Okay, or this is acceptable. Alrighty. So now, let's do one more example in this block. Okay, so let's do number 3. Number 3, okay, I have -3 times the absolute value of 7t is equal to 9. First things first, we have to apply the we have to isolate the absolute value. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Then I'm left with 7t is equal to -3. Okay, but what do we know about an absolute value? An absolute value is a distance which is always positive. So what does that mean? Absolute value, so abs value, can never you can put negative, yeah, you can just put neg, or you can say less than 0, right? So what does this mean? This means no solution. All right, so before we move on, I want to talk about, so what if, like say during a test, like a lot of stuff to remember, and what if we don't remember this simple concept of like a distance can never be negative, or the absolute value can never be negative. So what if we applied property 1? Right, so applying property 1 at this, so we can say 7t is equal to negative 3, or 7t is equal to negative 3, so negative 3, so what's that? That's positive 3. Right, so let's solve for, I get t is equal to negative 3 over 7, or I get t is equal to positive 3 over 7. Right, I'm only going to check one, right, just for time purposes, but they will give you the same result. Okay, so how about I'm going to check t is equal to negative 3 over 7. Right, so I have negative 3, remember we plug it into the original equation. Okay, so negative 3, and I have 7, and then t is negative 3 over 7. Okay, does this equal to 9? Okay, negative 3, and then this, so I have 7 on the top and bottom. Okay, so this becomes negative 3. Does this equal to 9? Okay, the absolute value of negative 3 is a positive 3. Okay, and then we're left with negative 9 is equal to 9. What is this? This is a contradiction. Because negative 9 can never equal 9, okay, that means t equals negative 3/7 is not a solution. Right, and then when you check t is equal to 3 over 7, you will also get negative 9 is equal to 9. That is also a contradiction, so then no solution. Right? If I saw this, I'd be fine as long as you get to this correct solution, right? As long as your logic makes sense. But this, as you can see, this is a lot less steps. If you just say that absolute value can never be negative and go straight to no solution, that's a lot less work than solving it and then checking both answers. All right? So now, okay, let's do the last couple of examples, and we will call it a day. Okay, so again, these examples, we're just upping up the absolute value. Okay, just what we'll have to do. Right, so I'm given 5 times the absolute value of w minus 6 plus 11 is equal to 86. First things first, we have to isolate the absolute value. So I'm going to subtract 11 from both sides, and then left with 75. Okay, divides, remember, it has to have a coefficient of 1, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. And I'm left with w minus 6. Okay, this is, what, 15? Okay, so I'm looking at this. Okay, 15 is a positive number, right? So I'm going to apply property 1. Okay, so this is w minus 6 is equal to 15, or w minus 6 is equal to negative 15. Right, maybe I can just say it property 1. Okay, and then above here would have been property 2. Right? So let's solve for w. I'm going to add 6 to both sides. When I do that, I'm left with 21. And then when I add 6 to both sides here, I get 15, or negative 15 plus 6. Okay, since the signs are different, we're going to subtract. Right, and keep the sign of the number that's bigger, which is 15. Right, so I have w is equal to negative 9. Right, now that we've solved for this, we have to check our potential solution. So we're going to check w is equal to 21. Right, let me add some more space real fast. Okay, when I do that, so I have 5. square root, and then I have 21 minus 6 plus 11. Does this equal to 86? Right. Then I have 5, and then 21 minus 6, that is 15, plus 11. Does this equal to 86? Right, the square root of, the absolute value of 15 is 15. Okay, 5 times 15, that's 75. Wait, geez. Also make sure you copy down the numbers correctly. This is 11. Okay, and then I get 86 is equal to 86. Right, so that means W equals 22 is a solution. Now let's check W is equal to negative 9. Right, when I do that, I'm left, so I have 5, and then I have 9 minus 6 plus 11, negative 9 minus 6 plus 11. Does this equal to 86? Okay, then I'm left with 5. Negative 9 minus 6, all right, that's negative 15. When the signs are the same, so minus and minus, you can add them. Okay, it just means it's getting more negative. The absolute value of negative 15 is 15. This is equal to 86, right? Again, so this is 75 plus 11. Does this equal to 86? Okay, then we'll get 86 is equal to 86. Right, so what does this mean? This means that our solutions are negative 9 and 21. Right, do not look at the right side of the page because I don't think I updated this. Okay, I did a lot of copying and pasting with my code, and I think I accidentally transferred the plus or minus 4 and 0 to these, and I didn't write the actual solution. Right, but this is the solution. We've checked it, so this is correct. Right. So now let's do the final example. Okay. The final example for the day, we want to solve for u in 3 times the absolute value of u plus 3 minus 14 is equal to negative 59. Right, again, what is the very first step? The very first step is isolating the absolute value. So in order to do that, I'm going to first add 14 to both sides. So I get 3 times the absolute value of u plus 3. Okay, if I add 14 to both sides, okay, these are different signs. So this is 45 with a minus. Okay, now I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And when I do that, I get u plus 3 is equal to negative 15. Okay, so I'm looking at this, right? We get an absolute value is equal to a negative number. So what does that mean? This means, so absolute value cannot be less than 0. Okay, so what does this mean? This is no solution. Right? Yeah, again, ignore that. Alright, so this is it for the day, right? And then we'll go over the in-class problems on Wednesday. Bye!